Mic level 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Noise suppression level 1, 2. Checking noise gate.
The marijuana agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah.
The marijuana agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music. The marijuana agenda, like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching. The marijuana agenda, like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, May 1st, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. And welcome to the new show, The Marijuana Agenda, coming to you live and direct from Delta 9 Studios in beautiful legal Potland, Oregon. This is your sampler for every aspect of the world of cannabis. We're going to be covering it all. Check out our new site at mjagenda.com. And if you go to the About page, you can learn about our recurring schedule of podcast features. This is going to be a brand new experience with so many more contributing factors in this show, so many other organizations joining us to bring you the full spectrum of marijuana. Today on the show, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Mitch Earleywine in our Prime segment, and then in our regional segment, we'll get to the Northwest Cannabis Chronicles, where Henry Rollins spoke at the Eugene, Oregon Marijuana Business Conference. That's coming up after the break. Also, we've got some drug war data mining and a radical rant to get to you, but we'll always start things off with the news right after our first commercial break. And remember, the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by these sponsors, so please support the sponsors of this show so we can keep bringing you this podcast absolutely free. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Veterans of Compassion with the Veterans Cannabis Group. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Monday, May 1st, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. President Donald Trump has invited President Rodrigo Duterte, an authoritarian leader accused of ordering extrajudicial killings of drug suspects in the Philippines, to visit him at the White House. Now, the administration is bracing for an avalanche of criticism from human rights groups. Two senior officials said they expected the State Department and National Security Council, both of which were caught off guard by the invitation, to raise objections internally. It is not even clear, given the accusations of human rights abuses against him, that Duterte would be granted a visa to the United States were he not a head of state, according to human rights advocates. Trump's support of Duterte follows his congratulations last week to Turkey's authoritarian President Erdogan and continued praise of Russia's strongman leader Vladimir Putin. Governor Eric Holcomb signed Indiana's first medical cannabis law Wednesday. It legalizes a form of cannabis, cannabinoid oil, or CBD, for the treatment of epilepsy. At the beginning of the session, Holcomb indicated that he did not support any proposals that allowed the use of cannabis. But this week, his tune changed, saying, quote, "This does not put us on a slippery slope to legalizing marijuana, quite the contrary," end quote. He says the testimony from Hoosiers in favor of CBD, a non-psychoactive form of cannabis oil, was powerful. Indiana legislators have considered CBD for epilepsy bills for the past 7 years. The new law creates a registry and allows anyone diagnosed with uncontrollable seizures to try CBD oil. The oil allowed under the new law must contain less than 0.3% THC and must be acquired from out of state, making anyone following the law an interstate drug trafficker under federal law. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is willing to explore the possibility of allowing NFL players to use marijuana for medical reasons, but he's not on board with the idea of taking it off the list of banned substances for recreational use. Goodell said on the Mike and Mike radio program that he continues to believe marijuana is bad for players. Quote, "Listen, you're ingesting smoke, so that's not usually a very positive thing that people would say," the commissioner said, adding, "It does have an addictive nature. There are a lot of compounds in marijuana that may not be healthy for the players long term," end quote. Goodell failed to mention any long-term consequences of marijuana more harmful to the players than the act of playing football itself, like the brain damage and chronic pain for which NFL doctors prescribe Herculean amounts of opioid painkillers. Mexico's lower house overwhelmingly passed a bill Friday approving the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes, the latest in a series of legal challenges and court rulings that have somewhat relaxed cannabis laws in Mexico. The measure does not allow smoking marijuana. The bill would also authorize cultivation of marijuana plants for medical and scientific purposes and establish that industrial products with concentrations of 1% THC or less would be legal to buy, sell, import, and export. The bill already passed Mexico's Senate. The legislation now goes to President Enrique Peña Nieto to be signed into law. Rules for the minimum age at which Canadians could buy pot, how many plants apartment dwellers could grow, and lengthy maximum prison sentences could be challenged by senators and opposition MPs as the government's marijuana legislation passes through parliamentary committees. Conservative MPs have stated that, quote, 18 is far too young an age, end quote, for legal cannabis. Others are concerned about the limit of 4 cannabis plants per household and the 14-year maximum sentence for exceeding that limit. With the end of the Vermont legislative session looming May 6th, marijuana legalization is set to come to the House floor. The legislation was expected to come up for a vote in the House in March, but amid uncertainty whether there were the votes to pass it, it was sent to the Human Services Committee. The bill would allow adults to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana and make it legal to grow up to 2 mature marijuana plants and 5 immature plants at home. It would not create a structure for regulated and taxed sales of marijuana, as has been implemented in several states, including Colorado. I'm Russ Belville with your Cannabis Headline News.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. Supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the voice of the industry from the National Cannabis Industry Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earleywine. Dr. Earleywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and author of numerous books and columns on cannabis science, culture, history, and medicine. Email your questions to Dr. Earleywine at 420research@gmail.com or call the Marijuana Agenda message line at 650-LEGAL-MJ. Now, here's your Cannabis Q&A.
Welcome to Cannabis Q&A. This is Russ Belville, and we're speaking with
Russ,
Dr.
it's
Mitch
but I
Earleywine.
can't hear you.
And we can't hear Dr. Mitch. Okay, let's see what we can do to get that on
give
the
me a try
line.
back, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, we'll try again, Dr. Mitch. We'll try again. Calling Dr. Mitch Earleywine here in our Cannabis Q&A segment. So let's see what we can do to make that happen. Thank you, Dr. Mitch, for holding on. We were to have this pre-recorded. Unfortunately, we're unable to get a hold of Dr. Mitch earlier today, so we'll see if we can hear him on this interview. Hello, Dr. Mitch. Can you hear me?
Indeed, I can. Good to hear your voice.
Glad to hear you. We've got a new setup here, so we're just making sure everything is still working. So we sent a bunch of new topics to Dr. Mitch. It's been a while since we spoke to him, so let's get right into it. There's a report out today from the Mike and Mike radio show where NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said he was open to the possibility of players using marijuana for medicinal purposes, but he wasn't sanguine on the idea of allowing recreational use. Really, Dr. Mitch, wouldn't any NFL player be using it for medical purposes?
In all honesty, when you think about the base rate of just chronic pain in the NFL, I think that automatically should let anybody who's playing actively have complete permission to go for it. But also when we see these cannabinoid-based neuroprotective factors, these guys are getting head injuries like you would not believe. And the number of folks who are playing concussed is unconscionable. So we really got to do everything we can to protect who are, basically our modern day gladiators. So I would hope that he would give everyone the benefit of the doubt and assume it's not recreational. Let's understand that, in a sense, being in the NFL is a medical condition that qualifies you for medical cannabis.
That segues so perfectly to this next news story that we heard about recently, and that is the National Institutes of Drug Abuse on a new website admitting that the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes in the states that allow it could be contributing to a reduction in the opioid crisis. We know these NFL players are prescribed a ton of opioids, so that seems to lend credence to what they've been saying.
They had televised and basically put it on the internet. One of those big talks that they had, and Nora Volcom mentioned this, and I literally just about lost my own teeth because they've been super resistant to this for so long. But the data are now so compelling. We've got evidence in multiple states across really large data sets, and now some data coming out of Canada suggesting the same thing. Obviously, we need to go ahead and take this step because the pharmacological properties of cannabis make it so that folks can use opioids at a lower dose and even get off of them for a while, maintain their sensitivity so they don't develop the tolerance, And nobody ever talks about it, but the horrible side effects of opiates are also a big issue. And so I think that this is a step in the right direction. I sure hope that NIDA and everybody involved at NIH will do more to make medical cannabis available for the people who are suffering from chronic pain.
Is this something you think that the pharmaceutical industry has been made aware of or has been aware of? And perhaps that might be why we see some of their donations against the legalization of medical marijuana?
You know, those guys know the Google Scholar literature as well as I do. And all you have to do is take a close look at what's been published since even 2007 and beyond, just the last 10 years. And it's pretty clear that this is a possibility. And the fact that they're still fighting this when they're making so much money, I mean, what kind of rapacious, greedy farts are willing to basically put people at risk for these negative consequences when it's so obvious that they could just get on the bandwagon, get in the cannabis business themselves, and go ahead and make sure that people are healthy. And that's really all we're asking.
Another consideration when it comes to the prescription of opiate painkillers are the list of side effects that come along with them. And some of those could include depression or anxiety. And there's been a new study that has compared the depression and anxiety among chronic pain patients among those who use cannabis versus those who use opioids. What can we learn from this study?
I mean, it's no surprise to any of our listeners that cannabis is not a source of anxiety or depression. And it's the withdrawal really from the opiates that seems to create these aversive psychological effects. And I hate to say it, the mechanism may very well be something as mundane as constipation. These drugs are so hard on your gastrointestinal system that anybody would be bummed out, nervous, and upset. And what a surprise, the plant is not going to create those effects at all. So here's an opportunity for us to really get away from some of the most addictive drugs ever, literally going back to 6400 BC, and move to a plant with literally millennia of safety.
Yeah, I've seen advertisements for a new anti-opioid-induced constipation drug. They call it OIC on the commercial. Seems to me you'd be better off just using the medical cannabis instead.
Exactly, and it's funny because a lot of them, you see the flyers and they've got like a slug or some animal that's notoriously known for moving slowly, as if your GI system is basically turned into a snail. and it's sad that they've kind of missed the big picture, which is maybe you shouldn't really be using these at all.
Now, our next story here has to do with a study on marijuana outlets, be they recreational outlets or medical dispensaries, and whether or not they are contributing to crime in and around their neighborhoods. And what did this study tell us?
Well, so it's interesting because the first data set that Rand published on this showed there really wasn't any increase in crime around those areas. And then suddenly, under all this pressure, they removed it from their website. Now the data are back showing indeed the exact same thing. And if you think about, responsible dispensary owners, they're often the ones who are out there finding a nice location, suddenly planting flowers out in the median of the streets. Really, they're eager to have their neighborhoods be safe because it's good for business. And so they may have to install cameras, they may have to install lights, but this is what's going to make the kind of community that you want so that you can sell the amount of product you want, but also so you can create the sort of therapeutic environment where people can come and actually have a socially supportive experience along with their medicinal cannabis experience. I really hope that these data get a lot of press.
Oh, me too. We have a question from our live chat room. They would like to know, with respect to withdrawals from caffeine, how long can that take?
So sad but true, the headache in particular associated with caffeine withdrawal can last as much as 72 hours. Now, I personally have not had that experience, but I haven't kicked caffeine in several years, and I'm afraid I'm about due yet again. I've seen some folks really suffer from this. And if you're at risk for migraine or some other headache-related disorders, this could be pretty serious business. Now, what a surprise. What is one of our favorite headache and anti-migraine medicines but cannabis itself? So the notion of using cannabis to get off caffeine may sound comical to some of our prohibitionist friends, but in fact, this is a reasonable, I think, experimental use. And if folks are giving it a try and want to email me, I'd love to hear how it goes.
Yeah, you can always email Dr. Mitch at 420research@gmail.com if you've got any other follow-up questions. Now, we've got another study, and this one ought to make the number crunchers in Washington, D.C. sit up and pay attention. It says that a national medical marijuana program could save Medicaid $1 billion a year. How did they come up with this number?
Well, what's curious is that they literally walk through each of the disorders that Medicaid is already paying for and try to get a reasonable estimate of what would a cannabis-based medicine cost instead. And I honestly looked at some of the assumptions on this, and I feel like this may be actually an underestimate. It wouldn't be a surprise to me, and I'm going out on a limb here because it's a little out of my area, but I think $1.3 billion is a completely reasonable estimate based on the assumptions they've made. And if you think about what we're paying, in a sense, because of the underground market and prohibition itself, there's a chance to get cannabis markedly cheaper, and we're already seeing it in some of the legal markets. So I would hope that as we look at the price of our medical expenses, we can keep this in mind and see this as a real opportunity to save money, particularly as our society is aging.
All right. And for our final question here, this one, sometimes, Dr. Mitch, when I go through these studies, I just wonder how they write the grant applications for these and how they get paid to do this kind of work, stuff that seems so common sense and so obvious. But this new study says that college students are at a higher risk for using marijuana than their peers who do not go to college. I mean, did this come from the Department of No Shit, or what's going on with this study?
So believe it or not, the woman who got that grant made a compelling argument for why folks who are not attached to college might be at risk for a number of negative consequences and a number of drug-related problems. But as you might guess, she's not a cannabis user, so she didn't understand the inherent college bull session component of cannabis. And that same data set did show that binge drinking is also potentially a problem in folks who are not connected to college. But as you think about it, those guys are often working jobs 9 to 5, pretty hardcore, pretty difficult work. And so they may not have the intellectual luxury, shall we say, of the average undergraduate. And so I think your Department of No Shit idea is a pretty compelling one.
Thank you for that. And if we can get a dean for that department, I'm willing to put in my application.
I got to admit, you'll have to line up right behind me, buddy.
Yeah, no kidding. This was no surprise to me. There's an old saying, there's a time and place for everything, and that place is college. I'm wondering, is there any indication as to which type of college or which type of majors may be more likely, law school or liberal arts compared to, say, business school?
All those data are from the early 70s, and what a surprise back then it was the West Coast colleges. And if you look where the legal markets are, I don't think you'd be stunned that those same people are now in charge of some of those laws that have passed and some of those dispensaries that are providing.
It would be interesting to see how enrollment has changed in Pac-12 colleges since the implementation of legalization in, I believe, almost all the states that play in the Pac-12 except the Utah, I guess. So that would be interesting. Have you heard any data on this yet?
The rumor, at least at the application level, is that the applications are up.
All right. Well, we'll pay attention to that, see if we can find any information on that in the future. Dr. Mitch Earleywine joins us every 2 weeks.
As part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me for A Sensible Future from Students for Sensible Drug Policy every other Tuesday here on the Marijuana Agenda. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in Drug War Data Mining, we want to take a look at a report coming out from Leafly.com, and they are investigating a recent complaint that was submitted to the regulators of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. A group of industry members are accusing Peak Analytics, that's the largest cannabis testing lab in Washington State, accusing the lab of large-scale inaccuracies. According to the complaint, Peak has been sweetening its THC content tests, that is, boosting the levels of THC beyond what were really reported, and rejecting an abnormally low proportion of cannabis samples for microbial contamination. Now, if these allegations are true, this of course would provide Peak Analytics with a huge advantage over their competitors, as more growers would want to bring their products to places that are going to get them higher numbers and lower failures. So this is some serious allegations. Leafly News did receive a statement from Peak that said the lab, quote, meets all state, local, and Washington State Liquor Control Board mandated regulations, end quote, and that their testing methods are scientifically valid. This was provided to Leafly by the Washington Cannabis Laboratory Association. This is a group of state licensed testing labs that were formed last year to promote industry standards. They did a survey of the various labs throughout the state of Washington, did some data analysis in 2016, and what they found was that most of the labs all hewed to a pretty standard bell curve, where they all fell in the range of about 19% THC average for what they were testing. The Peak Analytics average, according to the chart provided, shows a peak THC, or shows a THC average happening at around, or I guess I should say median, happening at about 22% THC. So from 19 to 22, getting about 3% THC higher numbers when you take your samples to Peak Analytics. According to the complaint, quote, these data indicate that Peak Analytics is producing data for flower well outside what should be considered industry-wide normative outcomes. That is to say that they're far above the median. They're way past all of the statistical averages in these considerations, and that's highly suspect. The complaint continues, quote, traceability data demonstrate that this over-reporting is consistent through time and across grow spaces. The data depicted in the graph represent tens of thousands of samples. So the Other things they found here in this complaint, some of the evidence that they provide to the Washington State Liquor Control Board that Leafly has picked up on. A cannabis farmer took samples from the same flower lot to 8 different labs, with the results showing a 13% spread in the results. Peak was the lab providing the highest THC percentage of the 8 labs, a full 5.6% higher than the nearest lab. They also said, quote, retailers have noticed that when their marijuana vendors switch testing services to Peak Analytics, their potency values go up by 1.5 times. Some retailers have begun requesting their buyers test at Peak Analytics, knowing that it sells better with higher numbers. End quote. The growers and processors contacted by Leafly News confirmed that this practice is common. And Jim McRae, who's a data scientist and independent cannabis industry watchdog, published data that he says corroborates these claims. He collected data from September 2015 to December 2016 and showed a similar gap in potency results between Peak Analytics and its competitors, as well as a gap in microbial fail rates. In December, the lab failed less than 5% of its samples. According to McRae, according to historical testing results that he has researched, he's never failed fewer than 10% of samples when he looks at the other labs. They usually fail 10% or more of their samples. Peak's maximum failure was about 5%. Nick Mosley is the chief science officer at Confidence Analytics. He's a competitor to Peak, and he's a party in this complaint. He told Leafly, quote, while it is true that in many areas of our work, cannabis science is in need of standardization, it is also true that adequate standards already exist for the relatively simple task of measuring THC in a flower or concentrate. Given that the lab in question is testing the same population of marijuana flower as are the rest of the labs in Washington, it's hard to imagine a good excuse for having such obviously biased THC results, end quote. So this pattern of inflating the THC and never failing microbial growth presents 2 problems to the consumers like us. Number one, we're paying for a product that is weaker than is advertised. We're wanting to buy a 25% THC and maybe getting a 20% THC. That's fraudulent. And of course, not failing these products that are failing the microbial standards risks our health. Risks the health of older consumers, risks the health of people with compromised immune systems that could suffer from fungal infections or other problems because of this tainted marijuana. The complaint says, quote, not only is the motive obvious, the evidence indicates that they took and continue to take the opportunity to provide consistently biased results despite having been notified in a documentable way, end quote. Tom Hubble from Peak Analytics sent an email to Leafly denying the charges. And according to his email, he says, quote, Peak Analytics meets all state, local, and Washington State Liquor Control Board mandated regulations. Our methods are validated based on the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia and were approved by scientific examiners from the R.J. Lee Group, as well as our Washington State Liquor Control Board certification. We were recertified for the second time in November 2016 under the advisory of the R.J. Lee Group, at which time our data, methods, instrumentation, SOPs, and personnel were all evaluated and approved. We participated in and passed the proficiency tests in the fall of 2016 that were approved by the Washington State Liquor Control Board and administered by Emerald Scientific and NSI Lab Solutions. Peak Analytics wholeheartedly supports the standardization of the QA cannabis testing industry in the state of Washington, and they continue to deny that there's any sort of problem here, which would tell me either Peak Analytics has figured out how to do it exactly right and everybody else in Washington has somehow done it wrong, or there's some shenanigans going on here. Something's going on with this testing. We'll keep you posted on that. Thanks to Leafly.com.
You're listening to The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda. Like the pharmaceutical agenda without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain.
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Celebrity Marijuana Zone with Steve Bloom from celebstoner.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Welcome to the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle, brought to you by the Marijuana Business Association at mjba.net, the fastest growing cannabis business alliance in America. Today, we catch you up on the latest news and speak with an expert from Cascadia bioregion of the Pacific Northwest, consisting of the legal marijuana states of Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. Fill your coffee and grab an umbrella. It's time for the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle.
Today in the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle, we bring you highlights of a keynote speech delivered by legendary punk icon Henry Rollins as he spoke at the Oregon Marijuana Business Conference in Eugene, Oregon. Learn more about the conference at OregonMBC.com. Now let's turn it over to Henry Rollins.
I am older than almost every single one of you in this room. I'm 56 years of age. Well, I'm just saying, there's... The thing I'm making reference to is American history. I come from Washington, D.C., and to the left of my mother is Joan Baez and a wall. To the right of my father is Joseph Stalin, a Fox News host on vacation, and a wall. And so I was passed between the two households. So 5 days a week I get Bob Dylan and We Shall Overcome, and 2 days a week I get my father on whiskey and making me sing the national anthem over and over again on his front lawn. His opinion was if you inhaled marijuana you would turn gay and the empire would crumble. And so that was kind of the mood and the attitude of marijuana in Washington, D.C. when I was in high school, where if you knew someone who smoked marijuana, the perception was he's not lazy, he's evil. He's a deviant. And this is when gay people were called queer, and homophobia and misogyny was everywhere. It was on TV, it was on the radio. That's all fine. But marijuana is bad. And then we heard about a thing called paraquat. And the whole time I'm going to a prep school for boys, and there was no lighter levity in that environment. And one time a kid, a 14-year-old kid, I was like 16 or 17, he brings onto the back of the bus a joint. It's about the diameter of a knitting needle. There's no marijuana in this. It's mostly paper and spit. He's like, hey, look what I've got. And we're looking like, are you insane? You have marijuana on this bus. He might as well have had a bomb. We're all terrified to stand next to him. We're all going to go to jail. You realize, I've seen a joint. Oh no. And then right around that time, I started going to Arena Rock. And I saw Aerosmith with REO Speedwagon opening. And the entire Capitol Center in Largo, Maryland smelled like cheap arena weed. And I remember standing next to Ian MacKaye from the band Fugazi. We've been best friends since we were 12. We're standing next to each other like, do you smell that? Oh my God, people around us are smoking marijuana. Are we going to be okay? Because we didn't exactly believe reefer madness, but we thought part of it might be true. And this was the perception of marijuana not even a few decades ago in this country. And so the point I'm making is, just in our lifetimes, we have come a long, long damn way. And so in the years that went forward, me not smoking, I started meeting more and more people who used cannabis. In high school, I wanted to meet girls, and I was shy and didn't have the hookup. So I would hang out with people who knew where parties were. And so I would go to these awful prep school parties where you were immediately judged, and you'd go in, and there's these guys, from the rowing team, like, what school do you go to? I don't care about talking to you. I want to talk to the girl standing next to you. Get out of our party. And no one wanted me. And then outside of most of these parties were the ne'er-do-wells who couldn't get in. And they were the ones smoking weed. And like, hey man, did you go in there? Yeah, they didn't want me. Come and hang with us. We're the potheads. The potheads. And that's where I found out I should buy Robin Trower records, because I would hang out with the potheads, who eventually I found out to be the greatest of skateboarders, because they were calm and without fear. And I would go to these skate ramps in the woods in the suburbs, and you smell marijuana, which is no longer an unfamiliar smell in my life. And you'd see these guys utterly stoned, dropping into these half pipes like, watch this, man. You try it. Absolutely not. I'm afraid of gravity, and I have no grace whatsoever. And so it was not this thing where, oh, you're stoned and you can't do anything. You were stoned and you were capable of quite a bit. And it was my on-the-street interaction with cannabis and cannabis users that started to change my mind. I got it from the real events. And so then I joined Black Flag, and I go into this punk rock world where there's a lot of speed, a lot of cocaine, a lot of anger, a lot of death, sadly. And I lived in Redondo Beach, a little south of the airport. And Black Flag did not necessarily hang out with people who went to the shows. They were maniacs. But our neighborhood was full of stoners. And we would hang out, and that's not exactly a pejorative, but that's what they called themselves. And they would call us, hey man, we're having a party in our garage. You guys want to come and play? Yeah, we'll come and play. We'll play this insane, aggressive hyenas on the Serengeti Plains music at your stoner party. Absolutely. So we go in there loading our gear like a bunch of feral barracudas. Like, here's our music. And the stoner like, all right. And the place, I would play in basements full of pot. And the main stoner, the guy who would throw the parties, his name was Casey. And Casey would come up to me like, hey man, we know you don't drink, and we know you don't smoke, man, so we got together, man, and we got you a Martinelli's apple juice, man, because we know you like to be healthy, and we're so happy you're here. I damn near wept. I'm like, the stoners are the nicest people. And then we would go play one of our own shows where people are standing in front of us like, you suck, and I paid $4 to beat you up. And so I started enjoying hanging out with the people on marijuana, and I never was curious to ever try it, but I liked being around these people who were so friendly and so cool and so sane and so rational.
Henry spoke wonderfully about the war on drugs, its impact on the poor, minorities, and such.
It's a war on the poor and minorities, and it's a war that wins because it loses. And that's why, unless you and I really move forcefully, it will never end, because it's too much of a moneymaker. And that's these people know. If it ends, you can no longer lock up black, brown, and poor people as easily as you can now. And as you know, you have about 50-50 using cannabis, black, white, in this country. Overwhelmingly, like 4-1, 3-1, you have African Americans incarcerated because of cannabis or nonviolent drug offenses. And so the racism it can't be more in your face. And like I said, if the beds start emptying because we legalize, they'll find a new thing to criminalize, and they'll make the way into the system. They'll grease it up, and you'll find a new way to slide into it. And so it is a war, and it's won by being lost. It's a scam. It's like so many things in this country. It's a scam. It's a scam. It's a scam. Like the Iraq War, it was a scam. 5 people got paid, and thousands of people got blowed up or just destroyed psychically or physically. But Dick Cheney and 4 other people got rich. And as always, so many things in this country from day one to now, it's a scam. And you and I, we are the anti-scam. That wasn't a question you asked me. I went off anyway, so go ahead.
Well, part of that discussion does touch into the areas of mass incarceration and privilege in in our society. I'm wondering, as somebody who worked in the major label world, do you have any examples of how rock stars got away with things that we wouldn't have gotten away with, privilege-wise, law-wise?
Statutory rape? I mean, no, rock stars get away with all kinds of things. It's a privileged class. On the bright side of things, on days when museums are closed, they open them for you. Wings of major art galleries open for you. These are the advantages I take. Yeah. You get to have rock star tours of the Library of Congress and the National Archives and sit in a room with the first 26 years of Congress and look at documents from Adams and Lincoln and all that, which I did. There's also things. People would see me on stage and then they'd find me in the men's room later like, you want more speed? Because they thought I was on speed. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't get near that. They're like, oh, come on, man, you're not high? I'm like, I'm high on life. and so there's a lot of things offer you. There's a lot of pleasuring that can come your way from people offering their assets to all kinds of things. And they get away with all kinds of things. But what to me, what a lot of people get away with is the crime of mediocrity, of selling mediocre product, of forcing bands who aren't ready yet to make a record and go on tour. The ripening, they need another year in the clubs before you push them out onto a big stage because they just wanted the money. So these bands are basically grown like menudo, and when they don't sell enough, they're just tossed away, and they grab from the farm team and they put them in there. It's a scam, and they make money off young people and their youth and their vitality, and they sell this. It's like Soylent Green. They grind up these people and feed these people back to them. And that's why the major label industry failed, because they stopped doing good things and they just went for money instead. And thankfully, it blew up in their face. And now you have the stuff that you see at the halftime Super Bowl games. It's just like, wow, they dance so well and she's wearing no clothes. Wow, is that a bit of labia? But like how little clothes can she wear? She's really pushing it, but no artistic thing is pushed. It's just pudenda, Latin, 8th grade. A long time ago in the major label industry, the art used to dictate the industry. And then the industry started to dictate the art. I remember somewhere in the 80s, record labels started putting out unbelievable, mediocre crap. And guess what? They lost everything. Whole floors of major label buildings went dark because they're laying off staff, because everyone finally went, you know what? This music sucks. And it costs too much. And you're treating us like idiots. So stop. And thankfully, I loved it when that happened because I knew I was right all the time. And thankfully, the major labels came into the breach, and now the independent labels, rather. And the independent labels are now better than ever. The best bands in America are on independent labels. And if you contact these labels, someone writes you back. When your record arrives dented, they send you another one. Why? Because they care. Or they'll have to like, we have to get back to you in 6 weeks. We only made 40 of these, man. I got to go to my dad's house to get the other one I left behind the couch. Hold on, dude, we'll get back to you. Where it's real personal. I'm hoping that you all understand that you serve the community you'll be setting up your store in, and that is of great importance to know the people who come into your shop. You are, in effect, a mom and pop store, and these people who are buying from you, if you're only in the business to sell something and make money, I'm not going to say screw you, I like you too much for that. I'm just saying you're failing the job. In my opinion, you're selling not only a product that makes people happy, but you're selling medicine. You're selling something that can help get someone off an opioid addiction. And so you are basically up against big pharma, big agriculture, the prison industrial complex, and the entirety of the Trump administration. Because now they're finding that cannabis can help with men and women who have returned from this awful war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it helps them with their PTSD. They are finding that there's all kinds of things that cannabis can do. You've always known this. I've always known this. And so you are an affront and a threat to their bottom line. And they love money more than they love you, of course.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com. The Marijuana Agenda. Like the gay agenda, only with better music.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Cannabis Minority Report from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
People don't smoke marijuana.
Today in the Rant, we want to talk about a story that I saw up on MJ Biz Daily, Marijuana Business Daily, and the title of it is MPP Chief Ready to Barter for Marijuana Campaign Donations. And it refers to Rob Kampia, the executive director, the founder of the Marijuana Policy Project. And the story talks about the state of Michigan, where he's up there trying to solicit donations for a 2018 campaign for legalization. And in this, the piece reveals a strategy or maybe a principle of MPPs, and that is the principle of doing what it takes to win. And sometimes this principle of doing what it takes to win runs into direct conflict with principles that some of us as cannabis consumers and growers and lovers of this plant, some of the principles we hold dear. And I want to talk about that conflict a little bit because it's hard to call it evil or good or bad or right or wrong. It's just a different way of doing things, and people can disagree on this, but I think there are some places where we need to hold the line. In this story, the quotes from Rob Kampia include him speaking to tobacco interests in Michigan. And the tobacco interests there wanted to see a requirement that anyone who would be a distributor, a state-issued marijuana transporter, anybody with that distributor's license, would have to have some experience transporting cash. And the quote that Kampia gave to MJ Biz Daily is, "To go that specific would definitely require someone to have to donate more, and no one was willing to. It wasn't like, hey, does anyone want to give us $500,000 for an oligopoly? That's sort of like asking for marriage on the first date. That's more of what would have happened if the conversation had gone further. Really, the question that I personally posed was, do you people care enough about limiting the universe of who can drive marijuana around that you would actually be willing to donate substantially if we narrowed the universe down from infinity to some smaller number?" And we got them interested, and that's why we were talking more than just one time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, to narrow the universe to start permanently favoring specific business interests, you have to give me a big dollar amount or I'm not going to want to deal with it because I'm going to get attacked by our allies. And then people were like, there's not actually a dollar amount that makes sense for this, end quote. So the principle being exposed here, I guess, is one that says, pay us enough money and we'll write whatever legalization plan you want. This seems to be the case in lots of states where MPP has had the hand in legalizing medical or recreational use. We saw in Arizona where they set up the 25-mile halo rule, where patients who lived within 25 miles of a dispensary could not grow their own cannabis. There was some excuse back in the day about it being to ensure there would be a market for the dispensaries, as if anybody ever went broke selling pot. Now, 97% of the patients in Arizona cannot home grow because they live within 25 miles of a dispensary. We saw that get added to Nevada's medical marijuana. We saw Nevada's legalization adopt that 25-mile halo. We've seen other medical marijuana states where it was a huge deal about making sure that people couldn't smoke cannabis, that people wouldn't have access to whole plant. And there's all sorts of excuses given for this, as far as you're having to get it through a conservative legislature. This is what you have to do to be able to get things passed. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. However, I would like to see some consistency on this principle. Here's where I have the problem with this idea of Campia saying, do people care enough about limiting the universe of who can drive marijuana around that you would actually be willing to donate substantially if we narrowed that universe down from infinity to a smaller number? Does anyone want to give us $500,000 for an oligopoly? And it was funny that he brought the word oligopoly into the quote, because back in 2015, there were 10 different investors willing to give $2 million each to form such an oligopoly, and MPP was neutral on the issue. I'm wondering if it had been MPP's idea, had it been Rob Campia and not Ian James soliciting those donations throughout Ohio, would $2 million have been a large enough number for MPP and Rob Campia to accept the oligopoly that was proposed? If this is the way the game is playing, I'm fine with it. If the idea here is whatever the market will bear, however much money we can get to pass legalization, whatever baby step we can take forward is worth it, I'm with you. I supported Washington's I-502, and that's led to all sorts of terrible outcomes. But it moved the ball forward. It got legalization moving forward, even without home grow. If we're going to make those sacrifices, that's great. That's fine. That's the game we got to play. Let's play it. And let's play it consistently. With some support from MPP, with some positive stand out on the street corner, yell it from the rooftop support from the marijuana community, from the big national organizations, that Ohio bill, maybe it could have passed. Now, obviously, there was all sorts of problems with it as far as the cartoon character mascot that they put out and the reliance on the youth vote, and going in a 2015 election when you're in an off year election, all sorts of ricky mistakes that were made by this campaign. I'm not saying that it could have passed, that it necessarily would have passed, but maybe it wouldn't have lost with a 36% majority. So if the deal here is that whatever the funders will propose is something we can go with, then let's go with it. I mean, Campia even said, I'm not going to want to deal with it because I'm going to get attacked by our allies. And surely lots of people, a lot of our allies here, a lot of my colleagues in marijuana reform were vocally opposed to the Ohio Issue 3 in 2015. So I understand, Rob, what it's like to be attacked over your stance on something like this. I stood strong for Ohio Issue 3 and got attacked from all quarters on this issue. But again, to me, it wasn't about how much money got raised. This was the best shot Ohio was ever going to get. And I predicted, accurately I might add, that if Ohio 2015 went down, there'd be attempts to pass medical marijuana by initiative to go for a smaller goal, which MPP did. And then MPP dropped that just as soon as the legislature realized, hey, we better pass something more limited, or they'll come around and pass an initiative that's more open.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
That's all the time we got. For everyone here at Delta 9 Studios, I'm Russ Belville. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of everyone, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio, and I got a toke, man. This has been a hell of a premiere day. Oh, yeah. Hope you like the new setup here. Beautiful Mount Hood in the background. Looking out from my mansion up in the West Hills of Portland. Delta 9 Studios has magically transported into the West Hills. It's just amazing. And you'll notice that the sky is permanently dusk. So, yeah, we got the green screen going. It's a lot of fun. A lot of work was put into this. And I got to say right off the bat, huge thanks to Matt Lee out there. You may have known him from the Hotbox podcast, also writes for Stuff Stoners Like. Huge thanks to Matt Lee, who did a lot of production on these audio elements that you're hearing. Some of the new promos, some of the new jingles and such. Came over here to Delta 9 and spent the weekend, and we just had a cram session as far as putting audio together. It was amazing, the two of us working here, and I'm sure we'll have more of his help in the future. Thanks so much, Matt. It was amazing. Glad a lot of you are right back here at mjagenda.com. I've left some notes out at radicalruss.com and my old YouTube channel. Fans of the old Russ Belville show, trying to bring them all back in, but we're starting anew. We're just, I've just had it with a lot of things, frankly, but I wanted to start fresh with a brand new system and a brand new platform so I can finally get a handle on the audience and get a handle on the statistics and the distribution and everything that's going on. And I've finally gotten a platform that makes that possible out at libsyn.com. So thanks to them as well. The mjagenda.com domain is live, and we've got a whole bunch of folks in our new IRC chat room provided by Kiwi IRC. So those old YouTube chatters that were complaining about that awful YouTube interface, now you got the good chat. Some folks have been calling for a pop-up. We'll get that fixed as soon as I can. Looking out at the chat room, Jackie Newberry asking, what are the options to access the show? TuneIn Radio, other apps. When I watch on iPhone, I can't do other tasks and have to remain on screen. Yeah, you'll be able to get all that stuff. This show will be podcast out through iTunes and TuneIn and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and all those regular outlets. Just as soon as we get this show recorded and posted, I'll be able to post those addresses. Since we haven't had a show yet, I can't submit anything yet. So as soon as I get that done, you all will be the first to know. There will also be a MJ Agenda app. That's right. The Marijuana Agenda app will be coming to iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, and Windows Phone. So Jackie, that should take care of it for you. Once we get that iPhone app out for you, everything should be fine. Also, some format changes you may have noticed. The first hour is going to be much more buttoned up, much more businesslike. There'll be more pre-recorded segments because the way the Marijuana Agenda works is that in that first hour, I'm including two mini podcasts, a first half hour and a second half hour mini podcast that are then going to be distributed through all those other outlets. For example, we'll make the mini podcast for Northwest Cannabis Chronicle that we did. That goes out to MJBA, and then they distribute that as their own little mini podcast. This exposes the marijuana agenda to a greater audience. Their folks come listen to the full podcast, and then they hear more about different areas. You know, we get business people that are going to learn about hemp. We get recreational people going to learn about medical. We get religious ganja people that are going to learn about the science and so forth. So that's my goal, is to bring everyone together. One plant, one people, one fight, one love. That's our tagline. It's all about getting past this tribalism in the marijuana movement, getting past this luxury we've had to be a medical cannabis person or be a recreational person or be a hempster. We don't have that luxury anymore under a hostile administration. We've all got to hang together, or we most assuredly will hang separately, as Benjamin Franklin once said. So that's the marijuana agenda, bringing us all together, understanding the breadth and the diversity of this issue as we move forward, from states as friendly as my home here in Oregon to states as hostile as my birthplace in Idaho. We're going to talk all about that, all the different aspects. Go to our website at mjagenda.com and look at the About page. It's right there at the top. There's a link for it. That'll give you the full schedule so you'll know which segments are happening on which days. We're running a 4-week rotation. So if you've got a favorite segment, you'll hear it at least every 4 weeks in the second half hour or every 2 weeks in the first half hour. Then, of course, this hour, Toker Talk Radio, going to stay pretty much the way it is. This is where the live stuff happens. We take your calls and check out the chat room. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earleywine from the Burning Issues podcast on cannabisradio.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back to Toker Talk Radio. Radical Russ hanging out here at Delta 9 Studios in beautiful legal Potland, Oregon, taking a look at some of the latest news stories, and there's some interesting ones out there. One that caught my eye is a survey of popular music. And the authors of this study are trying to discern which music has the most drug references. Which music has the most drug references in American music? And of course, we all know it's got to be rap music, right? It's got to be rap. Always smoking, talking about blunts and J's. Got to be rap music, right? Wrong. That is not the case. The actual, that's right, not the case. The actual genre that has the most drug references is country music. Yes, country music. Unbelievable. So in the study, they took a look and found that 1.6% of country songs contain a mention of drugs, and that jazz and pop were not far behind. The one that came in last out of the 8 genres that they took a look at was rap. Yes, rap music had the fewest mentions of drugs out of the 8 that were studied, with country music being on top. That's almost the opposite, I think, of what most people would have predicted. Now, they did find that when you looked at individual groups, on the other hand, when you looked at their references to drugs among individual groups, then rap artists are the ones that take the top spot. Cottonmouth Kings, unsurprisingly, take the title with 440 drug references that they were able to count. 440. Not 420, you'd think, but 440. And they were looking for weed, cocaine, ecstasy, acid, heroin, meth, and pills. And for the top 5 referencers of each of those 8 drugs, so there are 40 possible categories here, 31 of the 40 were rap or hip-hop groups. And had not only strong references for weed and cocaine, but with acid as well. That seems something you wouldn't think a rap group would reference very much. But when it came to weed, Cottonmouth Kings had 344 references, and then coming in behind were The Game, Cypress Hill, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and Redman. In cocaine, 2 short leads with 85 references, followed by Lil Wayne, Eminem, Jay-Z, and The Game. Ecstasy was referenced most by Tyga with 72 references, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and then we get the rock group Queens of the Stone Age referencing ecstasy, followed by Danny Brown and Cedric Gervais. Acid was most referenced by a group called Cloud Dead, followed by Scout Niblet, Deep Puddle Dynamics, Aesop Rock, and Eminem. Heroin was most referenced by Kent, followed by Kaiser's Orchestra, Lars Winterback, Insane Clown Posse, and The Game. Meth was most referenced by Method Man, followed by Wu-Tang Clan, Eminem, I Set My Friends on Fire, and Insane Clown Posse. And finally, pills, referenced most by Eminem, followed by Fauve, The Game, Van Morrison, and Lil White. And heroin was the one category where rappers did not dominate. Also, they found that popular music, the drug references didn't really happen until the 1960s. Not surprising, not a lot of marijuana songs out of the 50s or 40s, at least the ones that were hitting the pop charts. We did have artists all the way going back to the turn of the 20th century, Louis Armstrong and others who were referencing drugs. Oftentimes they were speaking in code. The biggest spike in drug references in music happened in the 1990s, but since then, the drug references peaked in the 2000s at around 6%. Now they've dropped to around 2%. Weed was the most referenced drug, over 30% of the total for drug references. It was the most referenced drug in 6 genres and in the top 2 for all. And cocaine was the most referenced drug for only folk music. And weed and cocaine together make up more than half of all the drug references. You can find out more about this survey at addictions.com. Quite interesting. Now, other news that we wanted to bring to you, coming out of the U.S. Congress, the $1 trillion omnibus spending bill includes the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which now is the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment. So according to the Cannabis, the congressional spending bill would protect industrial hemp and state-based medical marijuana. This was the act that was forbidding the Department of Justice from spending any money going after the states that were enumerated as medical marijuana states. There's another amendment that is called the McClintock-Polis Amendment, and the McClintock-Polis Amendment would do the same for the legal marijuana states. It would be a states' rights move for the legal marijuana states. Of course, this is going to face a more pitched battle in the House trying to get this one through because it does deal with legal marijuana. It's surprising, though. It's really frustrating because when we look at the polls, we look at the opinion of the American people, there's overwhelming supermajorities that say the federal government should leave the states alone. The federal government should just let the states set the marijuana policies in this country. And I'm not just talking about the people that support marijuana legalization. Even those that are against marijuana legalization say, let the states figure it out. They might not want it for their state, but they're fine with other states doing it. We had Ted Cruz on the campaign trail saying, if that's what the state of Colorado wants to do, then that's up to the state of Colorado. Even the Idaho Senate, which in 2013 voted that nobody, no how, no way is ever, never, ever going to use marijuana. It's always going to be illegal in Idaho. Even that group of legislators voted against another bill to tell the federal government that it needs to go enforce marijuana laws in neighboring Washington state and down in Colorado. So Idaho lawmakers, some of the most cannabophobic people on the planet, people that hate marijuana in all of its forms, still would not call on the federal government to bust people in the legal states. So the states' rights aspect of this, the support for this being an issue for the states to solve, is strong among the people. Now, there is a pushback. We're starting to push back on this theme coming from the people at Project Sam and coming from others that oppose marijuana legalization. They know the states' rights argument is strong, so they are trying to say that marijuana use can't be treated as a state-by-state issue because the effects of one state legalizing inevitably spill out into the other states nearby. Like Kansas will say, look, we don't want it legal, but when Colorado legalized it, all this weed came across our borders. We need to make sure there's a consistent federal regulation because when one state allows this liberty, it spills over into the nearby states. There's just one problem for Kevin Sabet in trying to get people to adopt this talking point. It's the exact talking point the gun control lobby uses against the states that have more liberal gun laws. Of course, Chicago has terrible problems with guns, even though Illinois has strong gun laws, because nearby Indiana gives all this gun liberty to its citizens, and it inevitably spills over our borders. Now, that's a subject that we could debate one way or the other, but it's tough to sell to conservatives the idea that we've got to go over into Colorado and start trampling over its state's right to legalize marijuana, when that's the same principle that liberals want to use to trample all over the state of Kansas for its gun laws, for the guns spilling over to Colorado, or for California wanting to stop guns from Arizona, or for New Jersey wanting to stop guns from Virginia or wherever. So that's a really tough game for them to play. It also would tie into the principle of environmental regulations, that we can't just have one state having an environmental regulation that allows them to pollute because those results inevitably spill over. That would be the counter on the liberal side. How can you liberals support these laws that say one state can't pollute because it affects another state when you'll allow that state to pollute their youth with marijuana? The marijuana issue as a states' rights issue is difficult for both sides to have to deal with, to reconcile and maintain any sort of consistency with their values, with their principles. To me, it seems clear. The federal government, there does need to be a federal standard on marijuana, and that standard should be, it's not illegal. It's not controlled. It's not on the scheduled substances list. If states want to schedule it, if states want to criminalize it, they can try, they can have that law. But this needs to be something where there isn't even a federal argument. The federal government, in my estimation, was never given the enumerated power to ban cultivation of hemp.
What are you people? On dope?
Well, not quite, but let's get to it. Because that sound means that it's 4:20 here at Delta 9 Studios. That means it's time for us to take our union-mandated safety break. You know how the unions like to mandate things. Also, make sure you check out the website for Delta 9 if you'd like to stay out here. We've got a spot for you, and it's cannabis friendly. Visit facebook.com/Delta9House.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaman Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cannabis Sports Medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. 23 after the hour here at Delta 9 Studios. And taking a look through the news and checking out our chat room. We're now on Kiwi IRC chat, and you can register your own username and password there if you like. You don't have to. You can join with any old name you like, but if you want to secure it and have your own guaranteed username with a password, you can do that. Just check out our mjagenda.com website, and the command you need is right there up above the chat. Just copy and paste that, and then change the password part to your password. Change the email part to your email. You'll shortly receive an email back that will contain a link, and you click that link and it'll confirm your account. And be glad to have all you back from all our various incarnations and get all that chat room happening again. Love to be back in the IRC because we've got those private chats that you got the messaging that you can do back and forth. You can put in links and so forth. So glad to have that working. We'll get a pop-up window for that as soon as we can. I'm a little limited because I had to start off on the Libsyn platform. Didn't have enough time to get the independent WordPress developed. So we'll eventually have the WordPress. And when that comes around, there'll be a whole bunch more features. Also, there's going to be a while before we get the subscription features taken care of, the paid subscriptions, that is, the VIP subscriptions. So for right now, the Toker Talk Radio Hour is going to be available for free for everyone as part of this platform. And as far as it updating all of the sites like iTunes and Stitcher and YouTube and TuneIn and all that kind of stuff, that's going to take place all throughout this week. So I will provide you as much information on that as I can as it develops. All right, I wanted to take a look at another story in the news that I found to be quite interesting, and that comes from the state of Nevada, where the Associated Press is reporting that a bill allowing localities to issue permits for marijuana social clubs has passed the Nevada Senate. It's going to go to the Assembly now. The bill passed 12-9. The bill was mainly drafted for the tourism industry in Las Vegas because tourists do not have a safe place to use recreational marijuana. It's also important to note that Nevada has the greatest penalty for public toking as a $600 fine misdemeanor. So yeah, this is something you can get arrested for in Las Vegas and the rest of Nevada. The law takes effect on January 1st, took effect on January 1st, and the dispensaries or the pot shops are coming soon. So soon, tourists are going to be able to purchase an ounce. They've already been able to purchase from the medical dispensaries if they have a medical marijuana card. So the folks at the casino industry are worried that with all these people buying weed, if they don't have lounges, the tourists are going to go bring their weed into the casino properties and be smoking off the corners and in the back alleys and all around the strip. And they don't want to have that going on. So they want to pass this bill. Now, the bill would mandate that the pot lounges in Clark County, the county in which Las Vegas is located, would be on the Sunset Strip. Lawmakers in favor of the bill say the lounges would play an important part in the budget because they would get some tax revenue from this. $70 million coming from the marijuana tax in the state of Nevada. State Senator Tick Segerblom said, quote, "We're trying to get $70 million in tax revenue from them, so let's give them some place to use it." That makes sense. Now, one of the state senators that voted against the bill, Don Gustafson, said he thinks people who voted for marijuana legalization in November did so thinking that people would only be able to consume marijuana in their homes. What do these people think? I mean, they obviously think of us as second-class citizens. They obviously think that what we're doing is so shameful and disgusting and dangerous that it ought to be consumed only at home behind closed doors, with the windows shut and the shutters and the shades pulled. Preposterous. Throughout the history of marijuana legalization reform, we have consistently said, treat marijuana like alcohol. Treat marijuana like alcohol. Well, how do we treat alcohol in this country? Hell, you can drink alcohol damn near anywhere. There's bars, there's restaurants, there's movie theaters now where you're drinking beer. You can take it to a lot of parks, will allow you to have picnics and bring a bottle of wine. We've got outdoor festivals where there's beer gardens and people, even shots. You know, we have craft distillers out here in Oregon, and they set up a little booth. You can get a sample of their shots. So treat marijuana like alcohol. Can you imagine them proposing a law to treat alcohol like marijuana? Try and imagine that. If you want to go get a beer, you can't get it at a restaurant or a tavern or a lounge or a grocery store. You can't do that. If you want to get a beer, you have to go to the beer store. It's a specific beer store that has ludicrously high security requirements that card you out the door before you can even get into the beer store. Once you get into the beer store, they'll check your ID again, and then you can go buy some beer. It only costs, $40 a six-pack. Just $40 a six pack, because there's a huge tax, that's added to your beer at the beer store. When you buy your beer at the beer store, it doesn't come in a regular old can with just a pull tab. If it was a can with a pull tab, a kid could open that. So there's a special kind of child-proof system on this where you have to do some sort of weird combination to be able to get the can open in the first place to drink your $40 six-pack of beer. And by the way, your $40 six-pack of beer doesn't have a colorful label on it, red, white, and blue Budweiser or anything like that. It's a very nondescript, very limited set of fonts that you can use on your can of beer, and you can't put a bunch of colors or cartoon characters on it or anything like that. And you got to put all these warnings on your can of beer. Make sure those are there. And then you can buy your $40 six-pack of beer, and they'll put it in an opaque container so that no one can see it, right? And they're child-proof cans. And then you've got to take that six-pack. Oh, and you can only buy a six-pack. Did I mention that? Yeah, you can only buy a six-pack. Forget about a keg. Forget about a case. No, six-pack. That's all you get. So you can take your six-pack of beer that you bought for $40 at the beer store, but then you got to take it home. You can only drink it at home. That's the only place. And you can't drink it at home. You can't drink a beer on your couch if your kids are around. You can't drink it in front of your kids. You can only drink it in private by yourself or with other adults. And as long as no one can see you. Nobody can see you. That's the rule. And we'll let you brew some home beer if you'd like. If you'd like to home brew some beer, that'll be legal in Nevada, but not if you live within 25 miles of a beer store. Can't home brew. Treat alcohol like marijuana. You think that would go very far? It wouldn't even get out of the first reading. Are you kidding me? So forgive me, Senator Gustafson, if you thought people who voted for marijuana only voted for it because the pot smokers would be hidden in their little cannabis closets and never seen or heard from, that's not what the people voted for. And the people were talked to about treat marijuana like alcohol, and that's what we want. That's our agenda. That is the marijuana agenda. Treat us with the same respect you treat beer drinkers. Treat us with the same respect you treat tobacco smokers. Treat us with the same respect you treat people on prescription medications. That's all we're asking for. And that includes a place to smoke marijuana, a lounge, a place for us to gather, to socialize, to exercise our First Amendment rights to assembly, to pursue happiness. I mean, the lounge issue is so much a part of what legalization needs to be. Now, I can understand perhaps an argument that, well, the lounge issue wasn't included in the original legalization. Understandable. You put too much stuff in these bills, too much stuff in these initiatives, everything you put in is something that can get shot down. So the only reason it wasn't included in the first place is because of people like Gustafson who would have huffed and puffed about it and maybe caused it to fail. Each of these issues can be taken up one by one. Let's get legalization passed. Then we can move on and get lounges. Then we can get employment protection. Then we can get all the other things that are attendant to what legalization really should be. And Nevada, you've got to have some sort of cannabis lounge. It's just got to happen. There's another story I want to make a quick mention of, an update from the Cannabis. Governor John Hickenlooper met with Attorney General and twice named after Confederate traitors Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. Hickenlooper says that he doesn't think the Attorney General is going to crack down on marijuana. And he tells the Cannabis that Jeff Sessions couldn't have been more emphatic about legalization being a bad idea, but also understood that Colorado's marijuana laws are the will of the voters. So this was, he was on MSNBC's Meet the Press Daily, and Hickenlooper talked about meeting with Jeff Sessions in Washington. It was an hour-long meeting that Hickenlooper requested. He was in D.C. for a convention. And he was also one of 4 governors that recently wrote to Jeff Sessions about this, saying, leave the states alone. And he says that Sessions was receptive to keeping the lines of communication open, but also that a policy position appears to be in the works. Said, quote, he's obviously reviewing the Cole memo. They're working on a version of that makes sense for this administration. We'll have to see how far they go. End quote. So he says he doesn't think Sessions will come down on legal marijuana from an enforcement standpoint, and said that, quote, he certainly listened. We in Colorado haven't seen a big spike in consumption. We haven't seen a significant increase in teenage consumption or any of these things. And he certainly was very direct and clearly said they've got a lot of priorities. And at one point he said, well, you haven't seen us cracking down, have you? And I said no. End quote. This is good news. Good to hear that the governor of Colorado thinks that Sessions isn't going to be cracking down. We'll just have to see. The Attorney General has given a policy directive that there needs to be a review of the Cole memo, a review of marijuana policies, and an update to how the federal government deals with those policies. If it turns out to be as good as what we've dealt with in the past, as we've dealt with the Obama administration, the hands off, well, then that's good news. Let's hope that's the way it turns out. I still think it's not going to be as good. It may not be as bad as it could be, but I don't think it's smooth sailing ahead. We will see. All right, stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cultivator's Corner with Jorge Cervantes from marijuanagrowing.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argosville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. 38 after the hour. And in this segment, I want to talk about a couple of my friends out there on the East Coast. Chris Goldstein is pretty much the man who created my career. He began the Normal Daily Audio Stash podcast back in 2006, which I took over in 2008, which has evolved into various incarnations, including Normal Show Live, the Russ Belville Show, and now this show, the Marijuana Agenda. And Chris was among many that were at a party, a pot party in the Philadelphia area that got raided. And there's a couple stories out on Philly.com that deal with the case. First of all, pot activist bail reduced, plans to use trial as cause celeb. This is N.A. Poe, another friend of mine and a good friend of Chris Goldstein's. Both Chris and N.A. Poe, you may recall, are the guys that held the 420 smokeout rallies at the Liberty Bell, at the National Park of the Liberty Bell, and gathered hundreds of people there to smoke pot openly at the Liberty Bell. I don't know if it's hundreds, dozens of people. Smoked pot at the Liberty Bell, and for that, they both got federal charges. And Chris, as a matter of fact, served a 2-year probation, during which he was piss tested and couldn't smoke weed. So whenever you hear the prohibitionists say, oh, the federal government's not concerned with, people that just smoke a little pot. Well, they are if you do it at the Liberty Bell. So Chris is now a federal criminal, got a federal misdemeanor, as is, I think N.A. got convicted. But this latest situation is N.A. Poe and his girlfriend, Rachel Friedman, threw this pot party in a basement, or in a warehouse, was it? It was a warehouse, yes, in Frankfurt. So they had allegedly organized a large marijuana party, charged people $50 each to attend. When they were arrested on April 22nd, this was the weekend of 420, they were arrested. N.A. Poe and Rachel Friedman had their bail set at $250,000. $250,000 bail for each of these folks. And of course, you know how bail works. When you want to get a bail bondsman to bail you out, you got to come up with 10% of that. And that's not the kind of money that Poe or Rachel could come up with, in the snap of a finger. So, $25,000 each, no way. So they had to spend some time in jail. The Court of Common Pleas judge just reduced bail down to $10,000. So now they got to come up with $1,000 each to get out. That's something they can come up with. But the allegations against the two are that they organized this large marijuana party, and it had 22 people there with 50 pounds of marijuana, 100 pounds of edibles, $50,000 in cash, and 4 handguns. The departments of licenses and inspections called to the scene found 20 provisions of fire, building, and business codes being violated. And there was also a request to have Poe required to take piss tests while he was out on bail, and that was denied. It's like, what's the point of that? Like, you want to prove that Poe likes to smoke pot? Come on, nobody's denying that. So this is now becoming a huge trial or a huge case going on with my friends out there in Philadelphia. And Chris Goldstein has written about it as well. His piece is, the war on marijuana is being waged on those who speak out. And the event is called the Philly Smoke Session, by the way. It's a Chris is referring to it as a smokeasy, like a speakeasy. And he says, he opens by saying, America's renewed war on cannabis consumers had its hands down the front of my pants twice last week. 2 cops searched my genital area during a raid on a 420 weekend marijuana party in Philadelphia. The Smokeasy event was like an indoor farmer's market, not a rave. There was even some rather delicious barbecue chicken. This mellow gathering was the target of a months-long major narcotics investigation and ended with a SWAT team coming through the door. So this is a raid of basically a little pot party going on. And according to Chris, dozens of underground medical marijuana patients, many with serious illnesses, were left terrorized by the raid. It made national news, and it prompted the mayor to call for Pennsylvania to finally legalize cannabis. As the raid was happening in Philly, 3,000 people in Pittsburgh were attending the World Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo, featuring NFL players like Ricky Williams and Marvin Washington, and Senators Mike Fulmer and Dalen Leach. Now, there were no arrests there, but there were certainly people, enjoying some cannabis at some of the after parties. After the Philly raid, the Pennsylvania Department of Health released a list of hundreds of straight-laced applicants competing for licenses to sell legal medicinal hash oil. Even some cops are applying for these licenses, including Philadelphia Police Department K-9 Unit Captain Mark Everett. The K-9 cops are even signing up to make their money in the green rush there in Philadelphia. So you got the cops busting the Smoke Easy party that's currently serving the underground medical marijuana patients. And they want to apply to the licenses to be the above ground sellers of those licenses. It just goes to show you again that this is not a war on drugs. This is a war between drugs. This is a war about who makes the money selling the drugs. And to have the state and the cops on the one hand busting these people, and then on the other hand applying for the licenses to sell to those people, it just reeks. It's just so ridiculous. I feel for Chris. You know, he's been a longtime activist, and of course Poe as well. And Chris continues to write, I've been briefly detained by federal, state, and municipal authorities in the process of demonstrating for different causes over the years. Still, the Philadelphia Police Department's narcotics unit raid of the Philly smoke session on April 22nd was the most invasive encounter I've ever had with a cop. For more than an hour, I had relaxed inside the party. Did I smoke marijuana? Absolutely. People freely shared some gorgeous cannabis. But I also smoked tobacco, which is rather taboo in the green crowd, so I was standing outside in front of the warehouse next to two hired security guards and having a cigarette when the initial raid was made on the party just before 8 p.m. I saw 4 white men with scruffy beards and longish hair walking abreast and with a purpose. They looked out of place like hillbillies in North Philly. For a split second, I thought we were being mugged. They yelled, "Get the fuck up against the wall." I asked who they were. "We have badges. Who the fuck do you think we are?" By then, one of the hillbillies had quickly turned me to face against a brick wall. My hands were up and legs spread. I nodded at the incredibly calm security guard next to me and said, "They have badges too." They said, "We're the fucking police." At that moment, the truth was clear as dozens of police vehicles swooped in and what seemed like an army of cops followed a SWAT unit through the front door. I heard plenty of shouting, but did not witness anything inside after that. But this is the raid, and you can read all about this. Talks about how one of the cops quickly pushed his hands in each pocket, then he grabbed the waist of my jeans, jerked them forward, and put his right hand down my boxers. He may have been wearing mechanic's gloves. Ghostbuster's hand, this is what he's calling the cop, was on my genitals for a split second, but it was more than simply passing along. My zipper was left open afterwards. This happens thousands of times a day to women and men across America on the premise of marijuana possession, but in all my years of police interaction, it was a first for me. The second cop's hand down my pants during the raid didn't feel like the TSA. The intention felt like calculated intimidation. Calculated intimidation. Exactly. And you have to wonder if during this investigation they find out that, oh, who's running this pot party? Oh, it's these outspoken activists. If that had any bearing on deciding to do this raid and the way in which they did the raid. Run around in the chat rooms asking, how much did the raid cost? Well, it cost plenty. That's for sure. If you're doing a 4 months long narcotics investigation, it cost plenty. Let's just get this legal. And as we move forward with legalization, let's make sure that our people are the ones that benefit from it. That we come up with ways to set up the rules, the licensing, the regulations, so that it's our people that are benefiting, not the canine cops applying for licenses, not the people in the pharmaceutical industry benefiting from it. And if you want that to happen, the fight now, as is the theme of this show, one plant, one people, one fight, one love, The fight now is for personal cannabis legalization. The only thing that's going to get us from here to being able to grow and use cannabis, whole plant cannabis, any way we like, to smoke it if we like, that fight now lies in marijuana legalization for adult use. It doesn't lie in medical cannabis. It doesn't lie in industrial hemp, not over there in CBD. That's not to say those things aren't worth fighting for and that those things aren't subjects that we should support. But we should understand they are separate subjects. What gets us to legalization now is legalization and talking about legalization. We're at a time now where majorities are well on our side, over 60% now. It's time to stop tiptoeing around. What can we get away with that won't scare them about legalization? What can we sacrifice? What can we put aside that'll get the most votes? Because now I believe we can get the votes for marijuana legalization with home grow. We did it in Oregon in an off-year election. And there were many forces, many funders that were pushing hard for us to eliminate home grow for legalization. And we stood on principle. We stood on principle and said we would not move forward without home grow for the people. It's not as much as I'd like. We only have 4 plants home grow. But you got to have home grow. We've got to have legalization. That's the only way we get access to whole plant marijuana. All right, we got to take a break. And when we come back, we'll close up shop here at the Marijuana Agenda.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact Normal at norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. 53 after the hour. Now as we close up shop here at Delta 9 Studios on the premiere of the Marijuana Agenda. Big thanks again go out to Matt Lee, who helped with the production of a lot of the audio elements. And coming up on tomorrow's show, we are in our first week rotation here on the Marijuana Agenda. And if you check out our website, mjagenda.com/about, you can see the regular rotation. You'll get to know which segments will be on which days. We're currently in Week 1, which we're calling the Western rotation because it contains the Western regional shows. But on tomorrow's show, You'll hear a segment called A Sensible Future from Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I spoke with one of their executive director, Betty Aldworth, and also spoke with Stacia Kostner, their deputy director. My interview with Stacia will play on tomorrow's Sensible Future. And then in the second half hour, we'll go into the Celebrity Marijuana Zone with Steve Bloom from Celeb Stoner, giving us an update on the latest stories of celebrities and marijuana. That's coming up on the Marijuana Agenda tomorrow, Tuesday, at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. All right, so now that we are closing up shop here, I had one last story having to do with the nation of Canada, which we all know is moving forward with marijuana legalization. They should have legal marijuana by summer of 2018, June or July 1st, 2018. This is going to cause a problem for Canadians who want to cross the border, or for that matter, Americans who visit Canada and then want to come back. But the Canadians themselves have the biggest problem here, because at the U.S. border, U.S. Customs may ask people if they've ever used marijuana. And if you answer yes to that question, you can be barred from entering the United States. Now, this is going to set up a situation where Canadians will be living in a country where it's perfectly legal for them to smoke pot. But if they answer that question truthfully, they're stuck in their country. They can't enter the United States. This has happened to a few people that I've heard from already who were Canadians who had come across to the United States to visit Colorado or Oregon or Washington State, where they could legally smoke pot, then returned home to Canada, and then the next time they wanted to come to the United States, answered the question truthfully that they'd smoked pot legally, and they couldn't come back to the United States. It's an absurdity where someone could be in British Columbia, Vancouver, BC, in summer of 2018, it'll be legal. Someone could legally smoke pot in Vancouver, BC. Someone could legally smoke pot across the border in Washington State. But trying to cross that border, if you admit you did something that's legal on both sides of that border, you can't cross that border. That's how absurd prohibition has become. So there are some suggestions. And one suggestion here is that a person don't answer the question. This was, guy's name is Saunders. I'm trying to find his full name. It's up higher in the story. Where'd it go? Saunders. Len Saunders, who's an immigration attorney from Blaine, Washington, says he expects his business to boom. Saunders said, Saunders said, let's change the question. What if they asked you about your sex life? Would you be so forthcoming? If you've smoked in the past, it's nobody's business. If you don't answer the question, the worst thing they can do is deny you entry. But if you answer that question and say yes, you're inadmissible for life. It's a lifetime ban. End quote. So yes, Canadian listeners, if you're coming to the United States and they ask you if you've ever smoked marijuana, just say you refuse to answer the question. I'm sorry, I refuse to answer that question. And they may not let you cross the border, but at least you'll get another shot at it. You answer yes, and you're barred for life? This is insane. And this is something the United States is going to have to adjust to. Problem is, of course, we're dealing with the Trump administration, who, which does not seem too friendly upon that idea. It doesn't seem likely that they'd be wanting to be seen as approving of marijuana use. I mean, it could be as simple as an executive order, a directive to not answer that question. But according to the U.S. law, it's a crime of moral turpitude when it comes to your entering if you'd smoked pot in the past. A crime of moral turpitude. Shows you again that it's just a culture war. It's always been a culture war. There's nothing about marijuana smoking that leads to moral turpitude. Folks, that's all the time we got for today. Time flies when you legalize. Thanks for joining us here on the new show, The Marijuana
Follow
Agenda.
MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
From here at Delta 9 Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.